Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in Matthew chapter 7. And this is a very interesting story that I'm going to get to later, but I'll just kind of give a preview. Where Jesus calls a woman a dog. And over the years, I've heard people try to sanitize that. Let me just say, Jesus called the woman a dog. Okay. All right. So let's get into it because it's going to be very interesting. We're in this particular part of Mark where there is a lot a lot of interesting stories that Jesus is going to do. Now we're going to pick it up where we left off in chapter 7. Remember, the Pharisees criticized him for not ritually washing, having ritual, and that's the epitome of religion, man-made religions that focus more on their views, their man-made procedures, rituals, and all that, other than the Word of God. And so they keep people corralled into their way of thinking. By the way, every denomination, Christian denomination, has some form of man-made rituals. Some more, the older ones have even worse, like the Eastern Orthodox, the Catholicism. You look at all of the stuff that they do, the robes and the garbs and all that kind of stuff. Well, Protestants are not that different. Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, even you can say Pentecostal. Why do you think ministers wear the collars? Why do you think they wear robes and all that kind of stuff? It's man-made rituals, and they'll do all of that rather than teach the Word of God. But okay, as they say, I digress. Verse 24 said he got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre and Sidon. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. Now, he tell you this story that he's getting ready to tell is why he could not escape notice. He said, instead, immediately after hearing, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. Now, the woman was Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to drive the demon out of her daughter. And he said, allow the children to be satisfied first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Now, this is an insult. The Jews refer to the Gentiles as dogs, Gentile dogs. So without a doubt, this was an insult. Now, in some respects, it was a well-deserved insult because non-Jewish people were ungodly. In terms of the general Gentile world, were ungodly. They were paganist. So, and of course, the Jews wasn't that much better. But in other words, but Jesus is using a slang, an insult. Now, it's kind of interesting because what would you have done? Think about it right now, today. What would you have done? And let's back up for a moment and remember, she heard about him, right? Immediately, he said, now, after hearing about him, and then she said her daughter had unclean spirit. She came and kept, notice this too, this wasn't even the first time, she kept asking him about her little daughter. Okay. um, she kept asking him. Okay. Um, guess I should add my group in here. All right. So, so, so here's what I want you to kind of recognize first. What is going on? What is being built here? And that is her faith. So let's kind of go back and stop because I want this story it is amazing to me. What what do you what do you think she heard? Well, obviously, what a lot of other people were hearing, that a lot of people were hearing, he was a healer, he was a miracle worker, he was the Messiah. Um, but in this case, mostly she was hearing about him that he was a healer. So she came. And all the stuff that was going around, she heard, and so she came. She had one objective. She wanted to get her daughter healed, and he was the man that was going to do that. And you also should know that she was a Gentile. So she was a Greek, a Gentile. So then he said, allow the children to be satisfied first, meaning the children of Israel. And if you look at other, like stories, one when Jesus said, "I am not sent, but to the house of the lost sheep of Israel." In other words, when Jesus came, his primary focus was to Israel. So when he says this, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But she replied to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." See, even the children eat, even the dogs eat under the table. Even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, "Because of this reply, you may go. The demon has gone out of your daughter." And when she went back home, she found the children lying on the bed and the demon was gone. So she walked away with her faith. Now, I think Matthew give more details, okay? And then Mark doesn't give many details because he first tried to come, and say, son of David, and then he just ignored her, okay? But notice that she was unwavering in her faith, even though she was insulted. Like I said, how many people would have walked away? If you remember a story in the Old Testament, Naaman, Elisha, the prophet, who was again famous for being a prophet who did miracles, right? He did miracles. His predecessor, Elijah, did miracles. Naaman was a Gentile who his servant was sick. No, I'm sorry. Naaman had leprosy. And so he had a slave that was an Israelite. And she said, if my master would go to Elijah, hey, he would be healed. So based upon that, she went and came to Elijah, and Elijah did not even come out, but said, "Go wash into the river Jordan," I think 7 times. But watch this. He was mad, and he walked away. He's furious, like, Jordan? First of all, this dude would not give me the proper respect to even come out and greet me, a dignitary. And then he's gonna tell me to go to wash in the river of Jordan, and he lists all these greater rivers, okay, that he said, I can wash in them and be clean. Why do I have to wash that? So then his servant said, well, if he had told you to do something great, wouldn't you have done that? So why not just go and wash? And he went and washed 7 times and came back healed. Now, the point I want to say that he walked away He was angry when he walked away. This woman, by the way, she said, "Look, this um, this man has the power to heal. Whatever you want to call me. Okay, if you want to call me a dog, you know, bow wow wow, yippee yam, okay? Okay. All right. So verse 31, him a deaf man who also had a speech difficulty and begged Jesus to lay hands on him. So he took him away from the crowd privately, and after putting his fingers in the man's ears and spitting, he touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed deeply and said to him, uh, if that, okay, that is, be open. And then it says, immediately his ears were open, his speech difficulty was removed, and he began to speak clearly. Then he ordered them to tell no one, but that the more he would order them, the more they would proclaim it. And they were extremely astonished and said, he has done everything well. He makes the deaf people hear, and the people unable to speak talk. Um, so again, now sometimes it's always kind of wondering why people might say, well, why did Jesus touch his touch his tongue? Like why did Jesus, why did he heal that way? And I mean, we're not necessarily specifically told why. We could probably surmise that when you do these kind of odd things, then how would you explain the healing other than the miracle? In other words, what logic or what scientific anything would you think that by putting his fingers in his ears and his spitting that would affect healing, right? That would affect healing. The reality is there is no reason for it. Okay, there is no reason for it. All right, let's slip over into chapter 8. First one says, in those days there was again a large crowd, and they had nothing to eat. He summoned the disciples and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd because they have already stayed with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way, for some of them have come long distance. Now, this is what we would call, now you could hear what's called a camp meeting. Now, today, there are ministries that would have camp meetings. And camp meetings today are nothing like this, right? Because, obviously the modern technology is just different. So today, if depending, a camp meeting could be in a church. So it could be a small camp meeting. In other words, there's no numbers. It doesn't say that you have to have a large number. So it could be a church. And then people would have like a 3-day kind of meeting. Now, in some respects, they don't call them camp meetings. They would call them revivals. Okay. But the camp meetings, then with larger crowds, you could have a church with 500, church with 1,000, whatever. Then you have church that rent facilities. Now, again, remember, these facilities in itself was not available, and especially when you think about certain regions, okay, they wasn't available to them. But today we would have, you can rent big auditoriums, stadiums like that. And then if you were very popular, you would have people from all over the country and then even other nations. They would come, they would stay in hotels. They booked these things in advance. So they would fly in, trains, buses, cars and stuff. And then for a week, they would have these, guest speakers and the whole particular show for these days. Okay. Now, in the olden days, a camp meeting would be more like this, that people would just kind of come from all over, and they would be in the open air. And then, of course, if you kind of read up on what is called the first and second awakening, this is kind of like what was going on. except in this case, Jesus was actually healing, teaching, the truth and things like that. So after that, here was the miracle, of course. Jesus said, I have compassion on the crowd because they've been here 3 days, right? 3 days. And then he said, I'm not going to send them away empty handed. All right. So, verse 4, his disciples answered, where can anyone get enough bread here in this desolate place to fill these people? Now, another thing is always funny about this is that why he's already fed the 5,000. And again, remember, just like as we're going to see, they're only counting the men. So you could even maybe triple the number because you have people with children, of course, of various size families, 1, 2, 3, 6, whatever. So at this point, you're talking about 12,000, 15,000 people that's assembled here. And again, sorry, ladies, that they only counted the men. The women wasn't that important. Just sorry, In fact, some of the stories is that they would be waiting around if a woman was pregnant and was giving birth. Everybody would just wait around, exciting. And if it was a boy, everybody would be like, oh, yes, yes, carrying on the male seed here, the family name, carrying on the family name. Now, if it was a girl, be like, oh, okay, well, and everybody would just go on, okay. Okay, that's just the times, right? It was just the times. So he asked them, how many loaves do you have? He said, 7, they said. He commanded the crowd to sit down on the ground. And taking the 7 loaves, he gave thanks, broke the loaves, and kept on giving to them, to the disciples, to set before the people. And they served the loaves to the crowd. And they also had a few small fish. And when he had blessed them, he said these were to be served as well. And then they ate and were filled. And they collected 7 large baskets of leftovers. And about 4,000 men were there. He dismissed them, and immediately he got into a boat with his disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. Okay. Now, again, some of the most interesting about these stories here was one, notice, so you had this crowd anywhere from 12 to 15,000. And then they all not just ate. If you've ever been to a banquet, many of us have, they just give you one plate. You don't ask for seconds. One plate. One serving, as they say. And usually they were serving size. That's it. They ate. And I think the last time when I talked about when he fed the 5,000, we kind of calculated if you just went to McDonald's and got one fish sandwich, that's it, bread and fish, just it, and you fed that crowd right here, 4,000, or anywhere from 12 to 15,000, you're up there somewhere around the $15,000. Okay, that's what you would spend, and then it'd be larger as you go up and count the women and children. 50,000, something like that. So that's a lot of money that you would be spending to feed people. And Jesus did it free. Jesus did it by the power of God. Okay? He did it by his power, right? He did it for free. So that's kind of an interesting thing right there, right? That he fed all of this crowd here. And remember, they were filled. And then you also see Jesus collected the 7 large baskets. You will find that Jesus did not like waste. He didn't like waste. Now, we don't know what they did with the large baskets, the 7 baskets that they collected. We don't know, but he just didn't say just leave them around. Okay, just leave them around. All right, we're kind of, as Marcus steamed us towards the crucifixion. And we're not that far off time-wise from the crucifixion. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.